David Ascher is going to be talking about the Internet of Terrifying or the Internet of Trust. He is currently the VP of Product for the Mozilla Foundation, where the focus is on MoFo products as making MoFo Wi-Fi product. I'm getting tongue-tied. MoFo products as widely accepted as possible. So come on stage.
Thank you. I don't actually know where you got that bio from, but that's all right. Wow, which website? There's too many websites. That's one of my problems. So hi, everybody. Let's see, where should I be? Yeah, go to full screen mode. That would be great. There you go. So I love being here. This is such a Vancouver event with one exception. To me, it feels like a Vancouver event because it's a little eclectic. You're not quite sure what you're going to get. It's super friendly. We talk about everything from going down in the ocean to going down in other ways. There's one part of this event that feels really not Vancouver and awesome, and that's the sort of grown-up European approach to alcohol in conversation. So that's really an amazing event. So as I just said, I work for Mozilla. We make Firefox, and we're a nonprofit that cares about the internet as a public resource. And I just got back from a 2-week trip to India where we did a design workshop with young Indian designers, potters, curators, activists, thinking about the future of the internet and sort of the Internet of Things and how we want it to be. And that's kind of a weird set of concepts. Why would we do that? Why would we go to such a different place, so far from Silicon Valley, to think about the future of the internet? And so I took a lot of pictures, so you'll see some of my pictures in here. This is a picture from a very non-special place in India. It's a lovely little town called Ooty in the south of India. And it's a densifying place. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of commerce, there's a hotel, there's people with phones. And the premise of the talk is that pretty soon, all of these things are going to be connected. The internet is becoming pervasive. It is becoming cheaper and cheaper. And as we've heard in many talks today, people are connecting them in all kinds of useless ways. That was a great talk, by the way. It sort of makes a lot of my slides hopefully motivated. All these things are going to be connected. And the question I have for you is, how does it make you feel? And in my experience, there's sort of 2 ways to think about sort of that. Next slide, please. The media, especially many of the clips that you saw earlier in the talk around sort of useless things, make you, want you to feel that it's awesome. And so here's sort of 3 examples. The one on the top left is an ad from Samsung, which I think projects a vision of the future of family, which is remarkably traditional. The woman is cooking for the young child who's wearing uniform, going to school, and they both have flexible screens, but otherwise they're doing very boring kinds of things. The one on the bottom right is actually the future of a car, according to a car manufacturer. So of all the things you could think about a car, they think that you should be in a virtual reality world where you happen to be sharing a space with 3 other people, but it doesn't really matter. You're just sort of watching TV on your way to work or something. And then the last one is a piece of sort of internet fashion art, which I think is probably like the most poetic, I think, version of the sort of future of the internet. But anyway, so maybe that makes you feel awesome. Maybe you're excited by this future. I'm not so far. Next slide. There's other sort of potential futures and potential ways to think about the future. The one on the left is a piece by Banksy, where he, I think, highlights in some ways, the transition that's happening when innocuous devices that we've gotten quite comfortable with, like payphones, become instruments for surveillance. By the way, I really like the way he connected the payphone with the satellite dish through graffiti. That's just a beautiful piece. And then the thing on the right is a thing that I mashed up a little bit. The notion is, for reasons that I'll talk about in a bit, this Internet of Things is becoming quite consolidated and quite verticalized. And so it's not actually that unreasonable to think that As Internet of Things giants like Apple and Google and Samsung and whoever comes next get stronger and bigger and more homogeneous, that you'll effectively have people who have, make Apple choices or Google choices or Samsung choices. And so here the idea is that, maybe you're coming into a house and you have a Google device and it just can't connect into the iPlug of your Apple house. And so like, what is that, that's a weird future. That is not a sort of the ideal future that we thought about back when we started. So whether it's creepy or frustrating, there's also like lots of not so rosy scenarios for the future of the Internet of Things. So next slide. So as I mentioned, it's not, like those visions are not how we thought about it. So I've been thinking a bunch about how we got to the Internet that we have today as a sort of an indicator of maybe where we want to go in the future. And there's sort of two thoughts that keep coming back to me. One is I was talking to an eminent computer scientist who said that until recently, most of computer science and most of the people who've been building the Internet have been working on a sketch or an idea or a sort of a vision of what the Internet could be that was set in the 60s, whether it's like Marvin Minsky at MIT or the folks at Xerox PARC in California or Tim Berners-Lee in Switzerland. The notion that the Internet was going to be this thing that was connect humans for betterment of humanity, for universal knowledge, for better relationships between people, for all kinds of things. That vision has been sort of drafted 20 or 30 years ago, and we've just been sort of filling in the details of the implementation. But we're getting to the point where we're actually running out of roadmap. We have actually not an inspiring, positive vision for what the future of technology is. At this point, I think the best visionary around the future of the Internet is a Vancouver native, William Gibson, who unfortunately paints a picture that's not necessarily so awesome. The other sort of lesson from the past is that so this is an early meeting of I think the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, back in the very earliest days of the Internet. The chap in the white shirt is Sir Tim Berners-Lee. But I think he represents a bunch of the same characters of the type. They were trained to be scientists, or they were working in universities, or they were government researchers. They were not entrepreneurs. They were not seeking to be billionaires. They had very idealistic views of what they could do to use their skills to build for humanity. And I think it actually, they were not perfect. They were far from perfect. But they had really good intentions. They had lots of idealism. And they also realized that what they were trying to build was so clearly too big for any one organization to do. And so therefore, collaboration was necessary. So I've been involved in Internet issues for a really long time. And back in I guess the 90s when I got involved, even then it was obvious that like, this thing is huge. There's no way that any one company, any one country, any one individual, any one pool of money can make this thing work. We have to figure out how to work together. And so that led to lots of conversations around values, that led to lots of negotiations around interoperability and making a network that was decentralized. And that really sort of created the foundation of the Internet that we are sort of using today. Next slide, please. Then a bunch of things happened. So the Internet was built in some ways, and lots of people created crazy things, good things, bad things, beautiful things. Some of those figured out how to make money, and some of those figured out the importance of design in terms of getting users to understand this thing that was originally really just very opaque and made for geeks. And some other people figured out the power implications of the system. And that changed a huge number of things. So next slide. Well, the first point is that the notion of values, the notion of interoperability, the things that power the open source, the things that powered all these things, kind of receded to the background. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So the other thing that happened is economics affected the modes of creation of the Internet and how much investment it took to create a thing. So back in the early phase of the web, not only could you not do it all yourself, but even when you did it, you had to kind of have a narrow scope. You would do a thing for a small audience, and you would figure out how to distribute the load across the world. With the advent of lots of technologies that I won't bore you with, it became really possible for any small entrepreneur to get some funding and have in their business plan, we will be the global solution for X. We will be the single provider of Y, right? So Uber does not have the ambition to be California's best service provider for transportation. Uber's ambition is to be the global transportation provider. Every one of those companies can rationally try to be a global single source, sort of single party solution to one of these problems. And so that meant that collaboration was not needed anymore. And that's had, I think, a huge impact on sort of the shape of the internet. And it, I think, shapes the future quite a bit. The last point there is that centralization is a thing that the internet was trying to avoid, but it's hard to avoid because it's so powerful. So one of the speakers earlier talked about sort of economies of scale. Centralization definitely makes some things cheaper as they get bigger. So that's a critical point. The other point is centralization makes design easier. Like Apple devices are easy to use because one company decides on the interactions of a wide range of systems. Similarly for Google, similarly for Facebook. The more you can centralize design, the more coherent the design can be, and that is actually I would say an unfortunate fact. It makes it hard to avoid the centralization forces. And then speed. You can go faster if you don't have to talk to anybody. You can just do it. So next. The other point that I think relates to power is the values of this internet are opaque to the users. So people will use things because they provide value to them, not because of the values of the people who design the system. So this is a picture of somebody taking a picture in Tahrir Square during the Arab Spring. And the two lessons there, one is if you make something easy and it gives you the feeling of value to you as an individual, in this case somebody trying to sort of agitate for political change, people will adopt technology even in surprising places at a surprising rate. The second part is the technologies that people use in places like that are often easily controlled. So the Egyptian government can turn off the internet. People are turning off the internet in various places around the world today because governments have figured out how to control this power, and that the users are not necessarily aware of the implications of the particular choices they make. So next, so what now? So hopefully that's not too depressing. I think that what now is we actually have to think about who's shaping this internet, and make sure that we don't trust the system to the same people who sort of are building it today. Right now, I would say if you look at the talk around the Internet of Useless Things, the people who created those videos, the people who are funding those companies, are what I would describe as techno-utopianism. They think that technology is going to solve everything, and they tend to do it relatively in isolation. They tend to do it without really thinking about the implications for society, the implications for democracy, the implications for things that have nothing to do with technology, but that maybe those things are sort of influence. And so that's why we went to India. So we went to India to get into a very different headspace, engage a very different set of folks, and ask them what they thought this technology should how it should evolve. Because technology is man-made. Technology is shaped by people who decide to shape it. So next slide, please. So I'll tell a little story of this student whose name, unfortunately, I forget. She's a design student at this wonderful design school called the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad. And we asked her and her peers to think about connected communities and what the internet could mean for her in the place that she was in. And it was interesting because we were seeking particularly Indian thoughts and particular emerging markets. Like there's all kinds of things that we think about India when we look at it from here. But the thing about her is she is first and foremost a young student who left home and went to university town very far from where she grew up. And so like a lot of her peers, a lot of the concerns she had when we thought about connected communities and connected home, the emotions and the feelings that came to her were actually homesickness and feeling like she missed her mom, which was just lovely. And so she made this thing. She made a prototype over the course of 2 weeks. She didn't know anything about coding, anything about Arduino, but she had a sort of a good workshop and a good mentor. And she made this thing, which is a demonstration of the concept that she was hoping to pitch. And I'll sort of paraphrase her story, which is she missed the connection to home of the sort of the ritual of the ceremonies and the singing and the music that happened in her family house in the evenings when her mom rang the bell and sang the songs. And so her device has 2 parts. It has a detector that figures out when the bell is being rung that she would put in her mother's house. And then the thing on the right is actually a set of LED things that lights up. And the notion is when her mom rings the bell, the system is aware and flashes her light, and she's aware that she can connect to her mom just through this sort of very carefully designed but emotionally powerful relationship. This is not what you see in the Internet of Useless Things. There's no Kickstarter for this. But I think it's a very powerful sort of positive vision of what this thing could be. And so we need people like her to sort of really sort of take the reins, I think, of the system a bit more than right now is happening. And we need everybody else to also be aware of what's possible, aware of the implications of the systems that are existing, literate, so that you don't like get conned, like is likely to happen, and demanding that the technology you get, the internet you get, actually reflects the values that you think it needs to have. So next slide. So my pitch is that the internet at this point is too central to society. We can't turn it off. I think that's just not going to happen. And it's also still has huge potential to improve the lives of a lot of people. But for it to be actually reach that ideal outcome, we need to combine the talents of technologists and executives and entrepreneurs and money with the talents and the experiences of everybody else, whether that's the educators or the ethicists or the marine biologists. We should marine biology, that we should connect the squid. And my pet peeve is a highly collaborative approach. This is not one in service of the other. This is really about finding ways together to figure out how we make this thing what it can and should be. Thank you.